Hey, I'm Tommy Ellison, and this is Senior Moments. I can't tell you what I had for breakfast this morning, but I remember every detail of that time I came this close to being suspended my senior year in high school, just 3 weeks before graduation. So stick around. This is proof that some things from a misspent youth just don't fade away. Let's go. Well, good afternoon, guys, and welcome to Senior Moments. This is August the 17th, and this is episode 17. And today's little episode is called Two-A-Days, Two Numbers, and Too Close. And probably that gives you no clue as to exactly what this is going to be about. So stay tuned and find out, if you would. Actually, this little podcast today is about an old friend of mine from high school. His name was Danny Evans. He was there at Fairfield High School with me. We played football together, and we were, before the days of BFFs, there was BBs. We were best buds. And, let me show you a little bit about what I was talking about. This is our football team back in 1967. I think this was our junior year. And then just to kind of zoom in a bit, there on the upper right-hand corner is yours truly, number 77, with that short haircut. Actually, it's a little shorter now, but for different reasons. And there's Danny at number 76 there on the lower left-hand corner. And couple of guys that are no longer with us. Ronnie Albright, number 78, and James Owens, who that year was wearing number 81. I don't remember him wearing that number before. Anyway, this was our 68 season, class of 69 team. And this was an undefeated team there in that 68 season. And you can see Danny and I back on the back row again, standing together. Why? Because we were best buds. And this was right after we finished football season, the summer after our senior graduation. And the only thing I can say about this picture is that we were a couple of working guys. This was shot late one afternoon on the hood of my car over at his house. And Danny was working for Buchanan Construction, digging ditches, and I was working for the highway department over on Findlay Avenue, a Findlay Avenue interchange, back when the interchange and the interstate was being built there in North Birmingham, which became I-65. So anyway, just two shots of two hardworking guys and best buds there that we were friends. Those were friendships that were formed in the summer furnace of football and two-a-days, which for those of you who don't know, that's when you actually practice twice a day. But even before we started practicing for football, we were having to run laps in the Fairfield Park, before the official practices could actually legally start up. All the team members, kind of on a, quote, voluntary basis, would meet and start running for conditioning in the park. I say it was voluntary because in reality, the coaches weren't able to be a part of that, so we were kind of on our own doing it, even though Coach Lutz and Coach Cannon were parked in their two little matching micro buses, VW micro buses, there on the street, watching and actually taking names as to who was there and who, maybe more importantly, who wasn't there. And, they would pay the price later. And Danny and I were kind of like running partners, I guess, because we ran together. And most of the time, at the very end of the line. We were not what I would call real aggressive runners, like, the flat belly quarterbacks and the running backs and wide receivers. We were linemen. So I guess it was expected for us to be a little bit slower than those other guys. But we would be running along, and we would be out of breath because we were both somewhat out of shape. Even though you dug ditches and you did things like that during the summer, it didn't really do much for your cardiovascular conditioning. And I can still remember the two of us just running along yelling, "I ain't going to make it. I ain't going to make it." And Danny would say, "I ain't going to make it." And I'd say, "Me neither." He was number 76 and I was number 77. We had a third friend, Ronnie Albright. Those of you at Fairfield remember him. He was number 78. And a lot of people thought of us as the big three. And I remember we even bought an ad in the spring play program. And it had in the ad the big three, 76, 77, 78, which was just a good example of a bunch of guys not knowing anything better to do with their money, I guess. But, it was no surprise that, we would be sitting in someone's downstairs den the night that this particular little fragment of this episode took place, because the government that night, it was in, I don't remember the exact day. I guess it was in the winter, it could have been December of 69, but it was when the government was drawing the numbers for the Vietnam draft lottery. And of course, the purpose of that lottery, was to, I guess, conscript young men to come and, not to volunteer necessarily, but to be drafted into the Army in the height of the Vietnam War. And the lottery was designed to make the draft a little bit more fair and transparent, if you can believe that about the government. And, before the lottery, the draft boards often had a lot of local discretion, which, kind of led to complaints of unfairness. And everybody remembers Creedence Clearwater singing the one about, what was the title of that song? It was about favorite sons, anyway. And so the process that they went through that night, and we were sitting there in the den with a lot of other people there watching the television as they drew the lottery numbers. And what they did, they had 366, one for each day of the year plus leap year, little blue plastic capsules. And like I said, they had one for leap year, and they were in a large glass container. And then each of those capsules contained a birth date, like January 15th or July 4th. And so the capsules were drawn out one at a time. And, the very first date drawn became draft number 1, meaning all men born on that date between January 1st, 1944 and December 31st, 1950, for that first drawing, were the first to be called up for service in the draft. And of course, they continued drawing the numbers until all the dates had been assigned a number from 1 to 366. And so it was the kind of thing where it was basically the luck of the draw, and everybody kind of had an idea that numbers 1 through 100 were going to be the primary target for the draft, where it would be a little less likely to be drafted if you were after number 100, and obviously those up in the higher numbers would probably never have the opportunity and the luxury to be drafted. I remember we were listening as they were calling out the birth dates and relating those to the number. And Danny had his birth date pulled out, and he got number 69. And I remember laughing at him. And then they pulled my birthday out, and I got number 68. And the laughter stopped, and I wanted to cry. And both of us, we panicked because we, again, were under that 100 number threshold. But we had a plan. We had some good news. What we were going to do, we had heard that the National Guard was not really part of regular Army at that time. And so those serving in the Guard were not eligible for the draft, nor were they scheduled at that time for any type of deployment overseas in Vietnam. So I don't know if it was the very next business day, but I don't know, it wasn't very long that Danny and I, we made up a plan, a scheme, I guess, that we were going to go and sign up for the Guard. I remember it took about an hour to fill out all the paperwork, and we finally did. And we went back up to the front desk where we turned in all that completed paperwork, and we said, hey, here you are. And by the way, when do we get our uniforms? And well, once again, we found ourselves running at the end of the line again, because we were advised that there was a waiting list of about 5,000 people ahead of us that had already signed up for Guard duty. Now, they didn't do it that day, but they had done it over a period of time, obviously. So I guess Danny was number 5,001, and I was number 5,002 behind him. And we kind of looked at each other again philosophically and said, we're not going to make it. So much for that plan. And you know, I'm not really sure why we were in panic mode. We were both students. We were getting ready. Actually, it was in December of 1970, because we were already enrolled in college. Danny was at Samford University. I was actually playing ball at University of Tennessee at Chattanooga on a scholarship, football scholarship up there. And, you know, we had student deferments, I guess, or maybe we were just too dumb to know about them and hadn't filled them out. But we were a little fuzzy on those details back then. But I transferred from UTC to Samford in early 70 to play ball, and I got a 4D deferment, which was essentially a ministerial student. A D stood for divinity. I was divine, a ministerial student. And so that was my pass to stay out of the Army. And Danny, you know, he had a student deferment, I suppose, because we didn't really have a whole lot of contact with one another right there during that time frame. But I did find out that Danny, he had an ulterior plan. He had a mom that worked at First National Bank, downtown Birmingham, and the commandant of the National Guard unit at the airport was a good friend of hers. So, proving once again, it ain't what you know, but who you know. Next thing you know, old Danny's signed up in the Guard, and he's kind of home free from going. Well, I continued to play at Samford, trying to keep my grades up, trying to stay in school, playing ball. And it was actually during the football season of 70. So that would be like September, October of the following, well, it wasn't the following year, but it was 1970. I got a letter from the draft board requiring me to go to Montgomery to take what they called a pre-induction physical. Now, I wasn't sure what that meant initially, but I found out that the Army now had gotten to the point where they were starting to run physicals even before you were inducted, before you were drafted, so that when and if you did get drafted, there would be no time loss in getting you to whatever training they were giving prior to being deployed to Vietnam. But on this particular day, and I remember I actually had to go to my football head coach and say, I can't come to practice today. And he said, really? And I said, no, I've got to go do a physical in Montgomery. So he gave me a pass, and I got a free bus ride to Montgomery, Alabama, with about 40 guys of all races and upbringing and religions and smells and clothing habits. I mean, it was a real hodgepodge of folks. And a couple of things happened on that bus that really surprised me. We were just north of Montgomery, up in that Prattville, Autauga County area, and we were passing by some cotton fields. And I remember some of the black guys on the bus had never seen a cotton field before. And I just thought that was really ironic in a way. I mean, I'm not going to go down that rabbit trail, but I just thought it was kind of surprising that they'd never seen one, And I guess the only reason I had seen one was because I spent a lot of time in the country with my dad hunting and that sort of thing. So anyway, my point being, we went to take that pre-induction physical. Now, I can remember it was really kind of weird because, one of the things you had to do was to give them a sample, a specimen. You know what I'm talking about, a urine sample. And when I was in the restroom collecting my urine sample in the little bottle, would this be a PG rated podcast? I don't know. We'll get through it. It's just a short story. I saw some guys that had taken little packets of sugar from the cafeteria down there and was dumping them into their little bottle. And I guess somewhere along the line, they had heard that, diabetics wouldn't be disqualified. Well, as we left that little phase of the physical, we were sitting on these long wooden benches, and there were actually one row or one column, but there was probably 50 or 60 of these wooden benches that were about, 30, 40 foot wide, and they were just packed with the guys. But up at the front of the room, they were doing the injections, the shots for the physical and the pre-induction process. And as that front row would be given their injection, they would move out and everybody would step up to the next bench. These old wooden benches sat about 18, 20 inches high. So it was kind of like an escalator, the guys would move forward and then they'd move forward again. You get the picture, I hope. And the crazy thing is this little black guy that probably, he was probably about 6 foot tall, and he probably weighed about 95 pounds dripping wet, really skinny. And as we got closer and closer to being on that front row, and he was about 2 rows in front of me, I noticed his eyes starting to get big because he realized what was going on that front row. And needless to say, this guy had some type of phobia, big time fear about that needle. Well, they finally got up to the first row. And as they started down the left side of that row, coming towards him, giving those injections, his eyes got bigger and bigger, and he got fidgety and fidgety. And finally, it took like 5 or 6 guys that were trying to, and I'm talking about Army guys, big dudes in shape. They were trying to hold him down long enough to give him that injection. It seemed like that we got one in each arm. So it was not just a one and done deal. He was going to have to take at least two, if I remember. And his attitude was, I'm not taking any. I can't do it, and he was freaking out. He was going into like a fit of some sort from fear, literally from fear. And they pulled him out of the room, went into another room. Meanwhile, we we moved up to our next bench. We were one from the front. And just as we were moving up to be in position, they brought him back in. And it still took several guys to hold him still long enough to give him that injection. And he finally got him. And as I was getting mine and leaving with the rest of the guys on my row, I asked one of the uniformed guys, I said, what did y'all tell that guy to get him to, try to settle down a little bit? And he looked at me and he said, well, we told him in that room, he said, either you settle down or take the shots, or your ass will be in Vietnam tomorrow morning. So he was, I guess, encouraged to go through with it. I'm not, this little episode, I'm not even sure how to end this session, because it was a kind of a mixture of emotions during that time. I can remember being at a concert at Boutwell Auditorium, and the announcer or a guy came out on the stage. This was been about 1973, and announced that the war in Vietnam was over. And of course, everybody cheered and hollered and hooped, and it was an exciting moment to know that was over. But in a lot of ways, I had a kind of a bittersweet moment, because, obviously I was thankful for being spared. I don't know if I'd call it the opportunity, but the induction to serve in a war that a lot of people just didn't understand why we were there to begin with. I mean, we had been there, for quite a while. And I was thankful for that I didn't have to go. But I was also thankful for those that served then and since then. And I was thankful for the families. I am thankful for the families that took a folded flag used to honor the lives sacrificed in the defense of freedom around the world and here. And, I still tear up a little bit when the Star Spangled Banner is sung on a fall night in a football stadium awaiting the kickoff of my grandson's game of the week. And I'm thankful for the service of my best friend, Danny. He made the Guard a career, and believe it or not, was later deployed to Desert Storm to serve with that 109 evac unit. And I'm proud of Danny, and I'm thankful for his service. And I guess, I want to close with what I don't. Okay, I want to close with what some people call Lincoln's prayer. It was actually the fourth paragraph of the Gettysburg Address, and it speaks volumes for the emotions that Abraham Lincoln felt for those soldiers' lives given from both sides of the cause. He stated it this way. He said, "But in a larger sense, we cannot dedicate, we cannot consecrate, we cannot hallow this ground. The brave men, living and dead, who struggled here, have consecrated it far above our poor power to add or detract. The world will little note nor long remember what we say here, but it can never forget what they did here. It is for us, the living, rather, to be dedicated here to the unfinished work which they who fought here have thus far so nobly advanced. Folks, I hope you have a rich honor and respect for those who serve. I know I do. And I hope that you will take these words of Abe Lincoln to heart in all that we do, both now and of course in our future. Got a couple of comments here. Let me see if I can get over there to them. Kathy Taylor, this is Danny's sister, my bud's sister. She said, I remember this very well, I guess this whole episode. My little sister's always up to something, and she says, I'm so curious as to what they were injecting you with. I have no idea. I don't know. I've never actually done any research on that. And my friend David Downs says, number 259. I guess that was David's lottery number. So David, he was clear. And Mr. Andrew Lowe, a friend from the creator community, says, great insight and so well put. Thank you, Andrew. I appreciate you doing that for me. So anyway, with all that said, I do appreciate you guys tuning in this evening. We were live at 5 and we were about to go off the air here, but I do appreciate it. And I hope you all guys have a blessed day and a great week coming up. Be sure and pay attention to this next guy because he's got some good things to say. And here he goes. Well, hey, thanks for spending a few minutes with me on Senior Moments. If you enjoyed the ride, be sure and tap that like button, subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell so you don't miss the next one. I'll be back soon with more stories from a misspent youth, and maybe some of yours too.